All right, guys, welcome back to RTW's Wild History Ride. I'm Thomas.
I'm Will.
And I'm Rhonda.
And on today's episode, we will be talking about the other four wives of Henry VIII. I will start us off with Jane Seymour.
And I will take it with Anne of Cleves.
Following that, I will go back to Catherine Howard.
And then I'll take it again with Catherine Parr and wrap it up.
And I'll be interjecting.
Yes, Will is back in town from his little mini vacation, here to annoy us all.
Well, I will say this. I was listening to it on the way back, and I really enjoyed you guys talking with each other. But my favorite part was y'all talking about like the family trees of some of these people. And
Oh my God, so interwoven.
well, when it starts looking like the family tree doesn't have forks in it anymore, and it looks like a straight line, I thought that was just an Alabama thing, honestly.
No, it is apparently a royal thing. So all y'all that have been making fun of Alabama need to stop, because we're royalty, apparently. So first things first, it has, well, how would I put this? Our numbers have drastically improved. We're doing really well. We now have a YouTube channel, RTW's Wild History Ride on YouTube. So I finally got that working. I still do not have Facebook, but I will work on it.
What was the Instagram? Did we have an Instagram? I didn't even know if we
Yeah,
did.
we have an Instagram.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought. I think I followed that. I just recently got back on Instagram. So.
Yeah, we have an Instagram, a Twitter, and then you can find us on a whole list of podcast apps, which I will add to our group Instagram and personal Instagrams.
Okay.
So we will take care of that.
Sounds good.
So anybody got anything they want to add before we get into this?
No?
Oh, actually, I do. We are now in South America. So the only continents that have not downloaded one of our podcasts are Africa and Asia.
Asia,
And, of
Africa.
course, Antarctica. But I'm not going to hold out much hope for that.
What do you mean, Santa?
That's the North Pole, dude.
I don't know. Either way.
No, I was going to say, we want some penguins to listen.
Oh, listen, I'm all for it. I said we talked about that Coca-Cola the other week. Maybe that Coca-Cola drinking bear is like listening out there.
I would love it. That would be awesome.
That would be cool. If we saw Antarctica, I'm going to be, something weird's going on there.
And also, are you going to mention our History Bites podcast? We now are out on Apple Podcast.
You're right. We have a second podcast, RTW's Wild History Bites, where we just take about 5 minutes and talk about some little odd tidbit from history and add it up and just talk about it. It'll be one of us. It won't be the whole crew, but just something to kind of
Wet the palate, or more something. I don't know.
something to kind of hold you over until it's time for another episode.
Yeah, and also something it makes you think, maybe makes you want to research something a little bit more. Like Thomas said, it's 5 minutes or less, not very long, but just putting something out there that might be of interest.
Well, we have a few out, I think now.
I believe we have 4 out as of right this second, and we should have 5 or 6 out by Monday.
Cool.
So, I guess I'm starting us off.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right, Jane Seymour, the third wife of Henry VIII. She was born between 1504 and 1509. I'm kind of seeing a recurring theme here where they don't know when people were born in these noble aristocratic families. Now, royalty, of course, you're going to know the exact date that a royal is born. But nobility, once you start breaking down after so many generations, you don't really care because they're so minor that they're not inheriting anything. But Jane was born between 1504 and 1509. Now,
Wait a minute. Let me just play devil's advocate here. I've got to do this. Is it just the women they don't remember when they were born?
No, there are several men in history that are like that too.
Okay, all right.
It's just
Just
once you're so far down, unless you have like a record of their christening, they don't know when you were born.
Listen, I'm calling out all the bigots, 1500s or not.
Yeah. So, like Catherine, she was a cousin of Henry. She was I believe, great or great-great-granddaughter of Edward III, making her and Henry 5th cousins.
They had kissing cousins then, too.
I know, right? It's like, okay, I don't feel too bad about my family tree. Then again, these people are my family
We
tree.
don't have,
so.
okay, let the record show also, we don't have any of that in our family. Like, it's completely a joke. And, like, gosh, people are going to think so terribly of us.
No. My immediate family isn't like that. But literally, these people are in my family tree.
Yeah. Okay. So this is your family tree.
So I can't make too many jokes here.
Oh, cousin Henry.
So she was 5th cousins with Henry. She was also 2nd cousins with Anne Boleyn and Henry's future wife Catherine Howard. Now, we talked about how impressively intellectual and driven Catherine of Aragon was. And also, Anne Boleyn, even though most people don't like her, she was a very intelligent woman.
I love her.
Jane was not as noteworthy as the other two wives by this point. She could read and write, and she had other skills, but her main focus was on the stereotypical houseworking kind of things, like needlework and just plain housekeeping.
So her education was more domestic duties
Right.
versus the arts or music or reading, writing, literature, all that stuff.
Which
The
might
different-
have also been due to Jane growing up in England, which was a very, very conservative country in comparison to France and Spain. Now, Spain was very, very Catholic, as was France, but they were both very progressive, I would say, in their way of acting and their way of thinking. I mean, Spain had a warrior queen, and France, everybody knows you party in France, but
Well, my thing is like, it's so funny to me that, you know, you have such this dichotomy. It's like women can't do anything, stay at home. Like, I don't know. It's so weird. And then you have all these other instances.
oh
you
yeah,
know.
where literally one of the most impressive monarchs of the past century was Isabella of Castile.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the guys obviously weren't that great in certain areas. So as I said, it depends on where you look, because you have some countries that their tradition and their culture is very restrictive, and then you have other countries where it's not. Now, Jane, I believe I have it right here. She served as a maid of honor for Catherine of Aragon. She also served under Anne Boleyn, but she's widely known to have, how do I word this? Thought very, very sadly of how Catherine of Aragon was treated and how Mary Tudor were treated. She apparently had a very loving opinion of Catherine of Aragon. Doesn't say what her opinion of Anne was. No, I haven't found anywhere, but I'm assuming.
When you don't have
That-
anything nice to say.
Exactly.
Don't say anything at all.
As opposed to, come sit by me.
Yeah. So yeah, she did work for Anne for a little while, but doesn't say how long specifically. It just noted that she became, I guess she would continue to be a maid of honor for somebody, but she left Anne's service at some
Yeah.
point.
Okay, can I throw something in here? And you may have this in your research. I don't know. But from last week's Anne Boleyn, one of the things that supposedly precipitated the miscarriage she had, the third miscarriage, was finding Jane Seymour sitting on her husband's lap. This being Anne.
I don't actually have that in my notes.
Yeah, apparently Anne flew into a rage, and they think that could have been what caused the miscarriage. I don't know how soon the miscarriage occurred after that. I think it was a few days. It wasn't exactly hours, but
Yeah.
a few days. And they think that may have precipitated it. So, yeah, she probably left shortly.
Wow.
Left her service shortly after that.
I will say she did. It is the first instance of her having gained Henry's attention would have been 3 months before Anne was executed.
so terrible. Like that sounds like that whole statement is just terrible.
Yeah, that wow. But okay, I'm kind of mad at myself here. I did not write down when Henry and Jane got married, but I believe it was some weirdly positioned time. Will, since you're sitting here listening to me, can you look up when they got married?
Yeah, sure.
Because I can't remember which wife it was, but I want to say one of them. It was like within. Oh no, I got it here. Here we go. I had it in the second page. Her and Henry got married 11 days after Anne was executed.
I just love that. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, when in doubt.
He
like,
didn't.
yeah.
He by that point he hated Anne. I'm so sorry. I got distracted by one section of notes and was looking in the wrong spot.
See, I gotta love Anne though, because when I think of Anne, I think of Natalie
Natalie Dormer.
Natalie or not? Yeah, well, Natalie Dormer
And Natalie Portman.
and Natalie, all the Natalies.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the actresses that have played Anne Boleyn have been great. But if you look historically, she was a homewrecker.
Yeah,
That's all she was. She was. I
Okay.
mean, she was.
yeah,
Give me something better.
No. I think you're right. I think she saw an opportunity and she took it.
Yeah.
Good for her. You know,
But-
we were having that discussion earlier today, like going to get lunch or whatever. We're like, yeah, like, you know, Anne was kind of dumb. Or something like
Yeah. Yeah. She wasn't very intelligent. And that she was very intelligent, but she did not think things through. Now, like I said, she had a very, I would say loving, respectful relationship towards Catherine of Aragon and Mary, and she didn't get Mary and Elizabeth reinstated in the line of succession, but she was able to get her or the two of them to reconcile with Henry, because at that point he had declared them both bastards. Yeah, he had stricken them from the family line. They were not considered Tudors anymore. Like we talked about last week, Mary was actually the nursemaid for Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And it's actually a very, very painful scene to watch. But in the Tudors, it actually shows Elizabeth in like rags. And it's like...
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever, at the beginning, I think, of season 3, it might have been the end of season 2, I can't remember. But somebody asks him for money to pay for her to have new clothes because she's outgrowing them. And he says, that child's not mine. Basically get that bastard out of here.
Yeah.
And but he wouldn't even look at her because historically, Elizabeth is the one that looked the most like him.
Yeah.
Fair skin, red hair, brown eyes.
Beautiful red hair.
Looked like Henry. But he claimed that she was somebody else's. And I believe it was Christmas. She'd already managed to reconcile him with Mary, and she brought forward Elizabeth, and he fully embraced her as his child. He didn't reinstate them, but he did declare them as his publicly. Now, Jane only interfered in politics one time, and it was asking Henry for a pardon for the participants of the Pilgrimage of Grace, which was essentially I believe it was Was it a Protestant rebellion?
I would assume so. I'm not really sure. But was this back to like a common prayer book, that kind of thing, where they wanted maybe translations and things for the common people?
I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically a rebellion. There were two parts to it. So the first one, supposedly they had worked out a peace agreement, and then something happened, and it boiled back over. And Henry had all these people killed. He ordered all their deaths, like even just the citizens who'd lay down their arms. It was very bad. It was almost to the level of Bloody Mary, from what I remember. But she asked for their pardon. He said no, and he is even supposed to have said a reminder to look to her predecessor for what happens when people interfere in his affairs.
Wow.
So he's literally making jokes, air quotes, about beheading her if she sticks her nose in the wrong place.
Imagine her diary being like, "Well, diary, today my husband told me he'd behead me."
I would not talk about nothing if I was married to Henry VIII. I mean, I'd be like stiff as a board. Yes, sir.
I'd be like Marie Antoinette, and I'd just eat cake.
Well, maybe that's why Jane Seymour is seen as
surviving and his favorite, because she didn't interfere.
Yeah, exactly. She didn't interfere and she didn't make waves, and she was the opposite of Anne.
Yeah. So she got pregnant twice. The first one she lost in Christmas of 1536. By January 1537, she was already pregnant again. And it's reported that she had a craving for quail. And Henry had quail sent from, I believe it was Calais, or...
Was it quail or quail's eggs?
I had quail.
Okay.
But yeah,
both sound good.
The French city that England controlled, was that Calais, or how was it pronounced?
I believe it was.
Yeah,
Calais.
So he had it sent from there. So he was very, very attentive to her. Now, in opposition of Anne, she was very reserved. She was considered gentle, kind, chaste, just as respectful as she could possibly be. Like, they didn't call her some amazing beauty. She was just what?
Plain Jane?
I mean, more or less. That's the best way to put it. But see, Anne had instated all these French fashions when she was queen for her people, the people around her in
maids,
court.
Maids of honor,
and Jane instead banned all French fashion while she was queen, and reversed all these extreme decorations for her rooms and everything to more of a plain, respectful atmosphere.
Okay.
So she was very, very conservative when it came to, I guess, appearances.
I like that.
Now, Jane's labor with her child was very bad. She was in labor for 2 days and 3 nights. And it appears that Edward was not well positioned, but she did finally give birth to him on October 12th, 1537, where he was then christened 3 days later. Of course, Jane wasn't there. It was, I believe, custom that the king and queen weren't there.
Shoot, let her recover.
Yeah, but his train was actually carried by his sisters whenever they brought him out. And supposedly when he was young, both of his sisters doted on him. Now, of course, as they grew older, the relationship between Edward and Mary would have soured quite a bit because Mary was an open Catholic, whereas Edward was very much pro-Protestantism. Like, he had some very extreme policies against Catholics when he was king. So, and none of that can be laid on Jane because I believe...
Jane's like, I'm just here. Like, I'm trying to have a baby.
Well, it's actually because she died 12 days after giving birth to him.
Oh, bless. Now I sound like a jerk.
Yeah,
Whatever.
she made it 12 days. Now, they don't know the actual cause of death for Jane. It's believed to have been some form of infection or a pulmonary embolism. But the infection's believed to have been because she retained the placenta.
Oh,
my goodness.
Yeah. Or
so she's probably just like also bleeding a whole lot too.
So the one time she was seen after giving birth to him, she was they said that she looked very ill.
Yeah.
So yeah, either that or something about the birthing room. She somehow caught an infection, but she never recovered and she died. Now Mary acted as the chief mourner for her funeral, and from the way they write about her in history, she seems to be the only Protestant that Mary actually liked.
Okay, so chief mourner. What is that?
That means the king doesn't attend funerals. Because any thought of the king dying is considered treason.
Yeah.
So the king can't attend. So whenever, I believe it's only for queens or princesses, but you have someone to act as the lead of a procession of mourners.
Oh, okay, I see.
So like behind Mary were 29 other individuals mourning for the queen because she was 29 when she died.
Oh, bless her. She
And
was
Mary,
so young.
and
baby.
Mary was the chief mourner, meaning that she led the charge, basically.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
And Jane is the only queen to actually receive a queen's funeral. And she's actually buried beside Henry.
Now, when you say, I'm sorry, Will, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
you're fine. You go ahead, Rhonda.
So, Queen's funeral, you mean of Henry's wives?
Yes.
Okay.
Of
Gotcha.
of the 6 wives, she's the only one to receive a royal funeral.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, would you ever think, like, at like wife number 6 and been like, is it me? Like, instead of like, is it me?
Well, you got to remember that Henry was going crazy by this point in time.
Very true.
He had an infection in his leg that would come and go.
Yeah.
They would treat it and it would come back. He had bone splinters and pieces of a lance still in his leg from 15 years before, if not
I'm sure
longer.
that's nice and sterile too.
So, for those who don't know, when Henry was a young man, he was considered extremely athletic. He did every sport he could think of. He wrestled, he would hunt, he would joust. He did not stop. Well, when he was in his 20s, I believe, it might have been early 30s, but he was jousting, and he got hit in the leg, and a piece of the lance got embedded in his leg. Now, I do believe that it actually closed up at some point, but something happened where it reopened, and they went looking in it and found bone splinters and pieces of the lance that they still had not gotten.
Gosh.
So the man was in pain every day of his life after that, and he'd also survived, I believe, 2 sweating sicknesses at that point. So basically 2 minor plagues had already hit him, and the same disease that had killed his older brother. So this man was very tough and very healthy at one point, but his injuries and everything, and just the sheer stress of being a king, was wearing down on him. The death of Jane was more or less the straw that broke the camel's back on his health, because he was consumed with such a depression that's when he started gaining the weight. He might have been a little bit overweight before this, but by this point, that's when he became obese, developed diabetes and gout. And it said
Rich
that
man's disease is gout, y'all.
And it said that he even wore black for 3 months after Jane's death, which I don't think he did for anybody else. So, and that is my Jane Seymour.
All right. Well, I guess I pick it up with Anne of Cleves. Now, Henry VIII was single for at least 2 years after Jane's death, and that kind of lends itself to he truly did mourn her.
Yeah.
And as Thomas said, he is buried with her.
Now, I thought that there were negotiations being put in place within months of Jane's death for Anne of Cleves.
Supposedly, I don't know if Henry knew about that. That was being led by
okay.
Thomas Cromwell. He was making inquiries, months after her death to find out who might be suitable.
I was just going to, there's words I'm not allowed to use on our podcast because we're trying to keep it clean. But think of the list of swear words. All of them are too nice and pleasant for Thomas Cromwell.
Can we just let him be single? Like, can we let him mourn and be single?
Yeah, he had 3 kids. He didn't need to be
do
married
you
again.
need a child? Like, no.
He already had 3.
I know.
Yeah, and at this point, if he hadn't been pushed into it, he may have not even want to remarry at this point.
Yeah.
But what was going on is that France and the Holy Roman Empire, who had always been at each other's throats, had made a truce, and so they were getting kind of cozy with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And since England had split with Rome, that kind of left England in a vulnerable position. So Cromwell was looking for a match for Henry that would be a good foreign alliance to, consolidate with England a Protestant relationship with another country to kind of give them aid, I guess, if you will, and not to be standing alone.
Yeah.
And that's when they looked to the Germans.
They did. They went to the court of the Duke of Cleves. He had 2 sisters, Amelia and Anne. Now, Hans Holbein was sent to the court to paint the sisters. Let me back up just a little bit. You guys had mentioned it took a while. There were some negotiations or some looking months after Jane had died. Well, supposedly some of the other princesses or duchesses, whomever, royals, had been approached after her death, and they were kind of standoffish.
A little bit hesitant about
just
marrying
a bit,
Henry.
A bit. And I wish I could remember the name or the title of one of the women. I think she was Italian, and she basically said, I would consider it if I had 2 heads. So,
I love her.
And she was very young.
So
she was
he
only
can
like
have
19.
one to chop off. Yeah.
Yeah, she was a young woman.
Where's her podcast? That's it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but the woman, I wish I could, again, I think it was Milan, but I'm not really sure. But she was very young. She was only like 19, but obviously a very smart, a very astute woman.
Side note, Lucrezia Borgia was considered as a spouse to Henry when he was young before Catherine of Aragon.
Oh, wow,
Just
really?
figured I'd
Wasn't she
add that
crazy?
in there too.
Was Lucrezia crazy?
No.
Oh, okay. So she was nice. Okay.
No. It was just they were very, very I can't say the word I want to use. Physically affectionate family.
It's a family show.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, back to the story of Anne of Cleves. So Holbein paints Anne and Amelia and takes the portraits back to Henry, and Henry likes what he sees with Anne. So he's like, sure, I'm happy to become engaged or betrothed to this woman, so let's make this happen.
Amelia's
Thomas,
like,
were you going to
"Thank
say
God."
something?
Precursor to nude pics.
Well, for real, though, but I'm like, poor Amelia.
Seriously.
Amelia was so happy. She's like, thank God. I hate Anne. I'm going to get my own room. Like, she was
It's
probably
like-
so happy.
But no, seriously, think about it. You want to know how this woman looks? You go and get a picture painted of her, and it is sent to you.
Well, I've seen
that is the
listen,
precursor of getting pics when you're a teenager.
that re-
in early
I saw the
20s.
picture. She looked cute, so I agree.
Yeah,
I thought she
that's
looked
what
cute.
happened.
I thought she looked cute.
Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong on that.
Okay, all right. But before Anne could arrive in England and the marriage could take place, the King of France and the Holy Roman Emperor start going back at it again or back at each other's throats. So the need for the marriage isn't quite as pressing as it had been previously. But Henry goes ahead and she arrives in England and he goes ahead with the marriage and just... I'm trying to think of a good way to slide this in. Before the marriage, he wants to meet Anne. He wants to see what she really looks like and get a feel for what she's like, personality-wise, and see how she reacts to him. So he and some of his men dress up in costume, or he's disguised, so she doesn't know who he is, and bursts into her rooms. And she's kind of put off by it. She was watching a bull baiting out in the courtyard and was not paying any attention to him. And he was trying to get her attention. I think he finally comes up to kiss her and present her with the gift that was from the king. She says, thank you. I don't know if she pushed away from him or not, but she was not overly impressed and went back to watching the bull baiting.
I like it.
And so he leaves the room, changes into more kingly attire, comes back in, and obviously is recognized as the king at that point. So I think that may have soured him a little bit on Anne.
And he was a very arrogant man, so being rejected in any form, regardless of how he was looking or acting, would have been a slight against his ego.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the marriage does take place, and they are married on January 1st of 1540. Now, the marriage does not last long. They're pretty ill-suited for each other.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, she grew up in she was taught more domestic duties and not arts, not the languages, not the music that Henry was more interested in, and his previous wives had been interested in. So kind of ill-suited with each other. The marriage did not last long, and it was never consummated, supposedly, or at least that's what Henry had said. And so he almost immediately starts looking for a way out. And they find out that she was pre-contracted or engaged to the heir to the Duke of Lorraine. And the engagement or betrothal, however you say it, was never completely finalized. And so when Henry starts looking for a way out, he's like, oh, okay, so that contract was never null and void. So she could not have become my wife because this was already in place.
Don't blame Anne, Henry.
So he gets his lawyers to take a look at it, and this is what they propose to her, is to have the marriage dissolved. Now, Anne is pretty smart, or at least she knows what's happened in the past. So she's fine with it. She doesn't put any obstacles up in his way to annul the marriage, and she actually testifies that it was never consummated and that her previous engagement to the heir to the Duke of Lorraine was never properly broken. So the marriage is dissolved. Now, Henry is very thankful for this because she didn't put up a fuss, and so he makes her quite wealthy. She actually is given Hever Castle, which was Anne Boleyn's former home or childhood home. She receives clothing, she receives additional manors, and I believe it's £3,000 a year is what she's given for an allowance. So she becomes one of the wealthiest women in England.
Yeah.
She's also given the title King's Sister.
King's beloved sister.
Yes.
I think it was a title. Well, I think it was a title he made specifically for her because, one, being treated as the king's sister, literally the only people higher than her of her gender would be the king's daughters and his wife.
Wow,
Right.
That's a good deal.
So yeah.
Right. Yes, those of royal blood, his children are. You're right.
Yeah, so
all the other women in
England.
ladies would have been below her in status.
Exactly. Which means that in other European countries, basically the title of the king's sister in England made her even higher than she would have been if she'd returned to her country. Mm-hmm. She would have been fairly high up there. It was a great deal. And Anne got off the best out of any wife. Supposedly,
Alive.
she was... Yeah. Well, there's others that survived, but
I know.
supposedly, after the divorce, her and Henry became best of friends. Like, she's one of his most beloved companions.
Yeah.
According to history. And she was even well loved by his daughters and son.
I like
They
that.
thought the world of her, apparently, up to a certain point.
They did. They actually did. And Thomas is right. She was well thought of. And why would she return back home when she, I'm sure, could not marry? She didn't marry when she remained in England. I'm sure she couldn't return home and
Yeah.
marry. There was no hope for her there.
Well,
And it
more than
doesn't-
likely, they did consummate the marriage. It's just she probably kept quiet because she knew it would happen if she fought.
Right.
So she
Yeah,
knew
she
she was
didn't want to
safer.
put up any roadblocks on that.
Yeah.
So, yes, she became quite wealthy. Actually, she lived quietly in the country. She would come to court, but she did love her stepchildren, I guess, or former stepchildren, or members of the family, I guess. I guess is how you would put it. But she did love fine clothes. So I guess she developed some bad habits. She liked to spend money on clothes, but she had plenty of money.
Good for
and,
her.
And she learned to gamble. She liked to
Yes!
gamble.
I knew I liked
It was
her.
Charles Brandon who taught her, right?
I believe it was.
I
believe
love
it was.
her.
And Charles Brandon is probably the best person in history in Henry's time.
In history.
Sorry, but because even though he'd done a few things to mess up over the years, he's the only person Henry liked after 40 plus years as friends.
Yeah.
So he was older than Henry by like 7 years, but they grew up together.
Yeah.
Like he met Henry when Henry would have been like 3 or 4.
Henry needed some
And
good people
so-
around him.
When Brandon died, like a couple months before Henry, he was still one of his best friends, and he even married Henry's older sister. Mm-hmm. Or no, I think it was his younger sister that he married. But her and him were Henry's closest friends. And
That's pretty cool.
Anne of Cleves, I love her and Catherine of Aragon because they were cool. I mean, if they lived in the modern era, those women could have conquered the world.
Yeah. I think she was smart. I think she listened to what was going on, understood what was going on. I think I think she was fairly smart and knew how to survive, obviously, because she made it through this. And as Thomas said, there was a close relationship with, like I had tried to say, former stepchildren, or now I guess relatives, since she was the sister of the queen, or sister of the king. But the last time she was seen in public, she actually attended the coronation of her stepdaughter, Mary.
Yes. I don't know how much more you have on her, but she was always invited to Christmas and Easter with the royal family. She was there at every event that she could be. She was there at Henry's funeral, mourning with the daughters. And when Mary became queen, her and Elizabeth were there with her. And I know Elizabeth sided with Mary against Jane Grey because she actually gave all of her support to Mary. I'm sure Anne of Cleves did too.
I'm sure she did.
The relationship between Mary and Anne did not sour until near the end of Mary's reign, when I don't remember the name of the rebellion, but there was a rebellion against Mary by the Protestants because Mary went extremely against Protestants. And they were big supporters. They wanted to kill her and put Elizabeth in charge because Elizabeth was Protestant. Now, by this point, both Elizabeth and Anne had publicly converted to Catholicism to stay alive. Now, Mary, being paranoid as she was afraid that Anne was backing Elizabeth. There was no evidence to support it, but she became afraid of that, so she kind of ostracized Anne. And Anne kind of disappeared from the public eye as a, hands up, I'm not playing this game. I'm going to go live my life.
With my money.
Peace out. So she just stayed in her estates until the day she died. She never lived to see Elizabeth be queen, which I think would have been awesome if she had, because that would have just been a beautiful thing for her, because Elizabeth was supposedly like her favorite person. They loved each other dearly.
And I don't have the date that Elizabeth became queen, but Anne of Cleves died July 16th, 1557.
You know, I had actually looked up a fun fact. So apparently, the kids used to call her Aunt Anne or Auntie Anne, which is actually why
I don't doubt it.
Well, which is why have y'all heard of that store in the malls that we have, like Auntie Anne's Pretzel Twister or whatever? That's actually what that's from.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah, you're saying that while we were checking some notes, so thank you, Will.
I had to contribute somehow. Auntie Anne. I thought that was so funny.
I wouldn't doubt it if they had nicknames for her, because like I said, from all appearances, history-wise, she was well beloved by the family. I mean, she was always at Henry's side at any event they did together.
Yeah.
I don't know her relationship with Catherine Howard and Catherine Parr, but I'm assuming that she was very friendly and cordial because she survived Henry.
She don't care.
But what I mean is she obviously didn't do anything that made them mad.
Yeah.
Because Henry was wrapped around whatever woman he was with at the time. So if Catherine Howard or Catherine Parr had said, I don't like her enough,
I think that's how they said it, like the Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I like the facial expression that went with that, too.
I don't like her.
But if they had done that often enough while they were still in his good graces, because as you'll learn, neither of them really were in his good graces for very long, but he probably would have done something with Anne.
Yeah, yep.
And actually, we thought we could get all 4 wives in one episode, but apparently I talk too much.
Oh, and I need to throw out real quick. When Anne of Cleves died, and I died, and I keep saying Anne of Cleves, I guess she could no longer be considered Anne of Cleves at that point.
I believe her title was still Anne of Cleves.
Auntie Anne, the Empress of the Pretzel Twister.
Thanks, Will. Thank you, Will.
She is buried at Westminster Abbey. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to throw that out.
Well,
there.
I like her. I like her. And Jane. I like Jane, too.
Yeah, Jane. People like Jane because she was kind of low key.
Shoot, yeah, he needs a low key wife.
Yeah, he needed somebody who could survive him. But my favorite is still Catherine of Aragon. Anne of Cleves is number 2.
It's kind of sad, though, if you think about it. I think a lot of the people just remember Anne Boleyn a lot because of, like, pop culture.
Yeah.
Homewrecker.
Well,
Homewrecker. Yep, they love Homewrecker. People love trash TV, and Anne was trash TV.
she was. She really was.
That's what she was.
All right. Well, like I was saying, we thought we could get all 4 episodes in, but we kind of went over time.
That'll be the next week.
So, yeah, next week we will finish off with Catherine Howard and Catherine Parr. So, until then, catch y'all later.
All right, you guys. See you.
Till next time.